What is up, YouTube? JankyYGO here. My name is Michael, and today we're playing Valkyries because I felt like it, and I like the deck. So, stick around after the duel because I will be going over the deck profile and ways you can play the deck and, make it a little bit more budget friendly than the build I am running. Uh, or options, that you can change it up with. So, our opponent is playing a Junk Synchron deck. That's pretty cool. I haven't seen a lot of these decks running around, but I like them nonetheless. We chose to go second because we are an OTK deck. We have no good first turn plays. So instead of, trying to force something that we're not, we're just going to see if we can play out whatever our opponent does. Alright, what do you do? Junk Speeder. Special summon as many Synchron tuners as possible from your deck in defense position. You can't special summon, or at different levels, you can't special summon monsters except Synchros the turn you activate. Okay. What do you do? Goryo King. So, when it destroys battle, you do... Okay. So what we're gonna do is, first things first, let's activate Foolish Burial. And we're going to send... Let's send this one. Next up, we're going to activate Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen. We're going to activate it. We're not going to even bother with our normal summon. We're going to summon Drite. Drite is going to get us a Valkyrie card of any sort we want to our hand. We are going to get Ride of the Valkyries. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to play 1 for 1. We're going to discard this. We're going to summon the level 1 from the deck. Level 1, if it's special summon, we get a special summon any Valkyrie monster we want from the deck, which is going to be Erda, which decreases all attacks and makes all of our opponent's monsters that become banished. Next up, we're going to use Ride of the Valkyries to summon Sigrun. Sigrun's going to summon one from our hand or graveyard, and we're going to get the one we sent, which lets us destroy a card. So, let's destroy the defense position monster, because it doesn't matter. What we're going to do is we're going to activate Ride of the Valkyries. And we're not going to link this away, because with Mist Time Goddess, all our monsters have to be Valkyrie monsters, and they don't have a link monster. So first things first, we attack with this. They take 200. This increases our attack. And then this is the whole basic OTK of the deck. So as I said, this is going to be more of a discussion video on the after fact. I do like our opponent's deck, though. It is pretty cool. So at the end of battle phase, we're going to activate Mischief of the Time Goddess. Then we go straight to battle phase again, and we finish our opponent off. So yeah, this is a fun OTK deck. It does have its issues, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, what is the deck profile? Well, one copy of Brunhild. Brunhild is okay at best, but it's mainly just another Valkyrie monster, and it gets pretty big if our opponent has a full board of monsters. Next up, Valkyrie Drite is... I'm going to try to pronounce these names as best as I can. Forgive me. This is the searcher of the deck, and it gains 200 for each banished monster your opponent controls. So it's good. It's like one of the best ones in the deck. Next up to Erda. Erda is a one-sided macrocosmos if it was summoned, or if by just a one-sided macrocosmos, basically. Any card destroyed by battle or card effect that would be sent to your opponent's graveyard is banished instead. So it's to stop graveyard effects and to power up the ones that care about the banish, because there are two that care about the banish zone. And it also makes your opponent's Monsters lose 1,000 attack if it was summoned by a Valkyrie card. That is very important because they don't have a lot of attack. The whole point of this deck is to rely on Mischief of the Time Goddess to OTK. So, Valkyrie Erda is one of the best cards to summon out. Next up, 2 Airstay. I'll hit this. Also playing 2 Synchruns. It special summons one from your, if it's normal or special, you get to summon a level 8 or lower Valkyrie monster from your hand or graveyard. It's a level 9, so it gets around that. And yeah. And it can summon itself by sending a face-up spell or trap card that you control. So it can summon itself. That's why it is probably the best level 5 or higher. But anyway, moving on to these. So Airstay, if it's special summoned by a spell, you get Bishop of the Time Goddess back from your graveyard to your hand. That's not really relevant because we have better ways to search it. And not only do you have ways to search Time Goddess, if you activate Time Goddess more times than not, you are going to be winning the game. The second effect is actually pretty relevant. So, if you control a Valkyrie monster other than Airstay, I think, yeah, that's what we're going with. Quick effect, you can banish one other monster in your opponent, one monster from your opponent's graveyard. This card's attack becomes the original attack of the banished monster until the end of this turn. Once again, fuels your banished zone synergies, because some of them have that, and it makes its attack hopefully bigger. You shouldn't be activating this card otherwise, unless you failed OTKing and you're just using that as disruption. Suite, the level 5, if it's summoned, you can target a monster your opponent controls, destroy it. After damage calculation, if it battles, you can return a continuous trap card or spell card from your graveyard to your hand. It's meant to work with the goddess cards, but that's not really relevant. I think I've only gotten that effect once, and you're not going to be using that effect a lot. The summon the summon effect where you pop a monster is the most relevant part. And yeah, this is probably, despite popping a card, one of the worst Valkyrie monsters in my opinion. It is 1600 attack, so it doesn't have a lot of attack, and it doesn't have really any way to summon itself. It's honestly a tiny bit worse than Airstay, and you wouldn't think that from looking at it. But Airstay actually has a lot of synergy with the deck on the banish thing, and can make itself bigger to help the OTK. This one helps the OTK too, but it helps it in a little bit less of a way. And at least that's what I've experienced on the deck. If you've experienced a little bit different, you can tell me otherwise in the comment section. We already covered the Searcher. Next up, Vierte, the Valkyrie Vierte. Airstay Vierte. During your main phase, you activate the top number of cards of your Valkyries, and then you add an activated normal spell card. Also send them to the graveyard, otherwise you just shuffle all the activators, and if it's destroyed by battle, it floats into any Valkyrie monster. So the first effect is pretty good. In general, what it does is it lets you get your normal spell cards, which your normal spell cards are your powerhouse cards. That's your 1-for-1, your Raigeki, your Final Light, your Foolish Burial of Goods, your Pot of Extravagance, and all of that. So, those are your powerhouse cards. Rite of the Valkyries is also a card that this can search. However, the Destroyed by Battle this card is probably the best card if you're going first, actually. Because if you go first, this deck is kind of like really, really bad. You don't want to ever go first. That's what this card kind of helps with. And we can talk about some options for going first build after I cover what this deck does in general. So yeah, that's what this card does. It's great. It's definitely one of the better cards. The next card is one of the weaker cards in the deck, but it's still decent to run because it's a Valkyrie monster, and on top of that, it powers up the rest of your team, which is uh, Funufte. Uh, so gain all Valkyrie monsters gain 200 attack for each of your opponent's banished, and then if you control a Valkyrie other than itself, you send a spell trap card from your deck to the grave. So this card's really good because when you combo it with Erda, as you're attacking over your stuff, your monsters are getting bigger to help you OTK. The second effect is also really good to help send Ride of the Valkyries if you didn't summon a lot with Ride, because there are situations where that's just not going to happen. So you can like one for one out the level 1, which you saw us do, throw out Synchron, throw out maybe this or Erda, and then you won't have the ability to OTK necessarily unless you normal summon this, because in that scenario we have it normal summoned. So you normal summon this, and then you can send Ride of the Valkyries, and which will search you your Time Goddess. So that's why this card is in the deck. It powers up our stuff, and it also is kind of a searcher. Next up is this card. Its second effect is not relevant. I'm not going to read it because, if anything, you don't want to use its second effect. But if this card is special summon, you special summon one Valkyrie monster from your deck except for itself. Its second effect is you you mill your opponent for 2. That effect, don't ever use that effect unless you're like really desperate for some reason to mill them out. But milling is generally not a good thing to do because most decks have graveyard synergy, so you don't want that. This card's good. It's a target off 1 for 1, and it's going to be the card that you're going to special summon as. You're going to try to special summon off of, like, your 1 for 1, maybe Valhalla, you're off of your Sig run if you have it in hand, and stuff like that. 1 for 1. Speaking of 1 for 1, we're playing that. It summons out the level 1, which helps the OTK. Raigeki. Raigeki is in this deck to break our opponent's board, hopefully, or get at least one negation out. Because this is a going second deck, we don't mind running Raigeki in the main deck, since we're just trying to go second and we're trying to OTK. Next up is Final Light. Final Light is the deck's version of Soul Charge. So, which means, except for you are allowed to attack. You're allowed to do almost everything you want with the monsters. You just have to pay the life points for it. And your opponent gets monsters back too from the graveyard, but that's not going to matter. You use this kind of as more or less as a Monster Reborn. I'm not playing Monster Reborn, but I could. And that's what this kind of does. Is most times it's just a Monster Reborn, or you pay 2, or you summon 2 off of it. I think the most I've ever summoned was 3, but funny enough, usually when I do that, if I summon more than that, you need to make sure your opponent isn't going to get some insane monsters back. I know they summon monsters 2000 or less attack, which is the most helpful thing actually about this card. Not only does it recover, but it also limits your opponent on what they can summon back. So hopefully they don't get anything too crazy, and hopefully you're not activating this after you like broke their board and need to do it. 1 copy of Foolish Burial Goods. This sends a Ride of the Valkyries, so we can get Time Goddess if we already have like an established board without playing Ride of the Valkyries. Next up, this card is what puts this version of the deck really expensive. I'm playing 3 Extravagance because our extra deck doesn't matter. So, as you know, I have a 15 card extra deck. I'm not even going to bother going into those because Pot of Extravagance is basically, it's just Pot of Extravagance fuel. But yeah, so Pot of Extravagance, draw, power. Ride of the Valkyries is one of the win conditions of this deck, which is you summon any number of Valkyries with different names, and if you summon 3 or more, you take no battle damage until the end of the next turn. So you still don't take, if something goes wrong, you don't know TK, you don't take any battle damage until your next turn, which is good. And then you can banish it from your graveyard to add a Mischief of the Time Goddess. Note, it does not say, except for the turn it is sent to the graveyard, so it is a deck centered around the whole OTK factor. Uh, Foolish Burial helps us with plays with Synchron and our Final Light. That's why it's in the deck. Time Goddess is our win condition. As you saw in the gameplay, this is what caused the OTK. The monsters themselves are pretty small, and having to attack through a board means that you're not going to get to OTK. However, Time Goddess kind of negates all that nonsense and lets you do that, so that's why you obviously need to play 3. You can't even really play the deck without Time Goddess, because if you try, you're going to end up in this really weird thing where you're going to summon a bunch of monsters and then they're just going to shuffle back in, and no matter and nothing you do can really stop that, because Ride of the Valkyries shuffles your monsters back in, and you don't have any disruption. So if your opponent has any way to recover after you attempted to OTK and just didn't, because you're not playing Time Goddess, you'd fall apart. So Valhalla Hall of the Fallen is really good for fairies, and we're running a lot of level 5 or higher monsters, so you kind of need to play it. At least in my opinion. If you don't play it, you're going to end up with hands where you just have a bunch of high level monsters and nothing to do with it, and it becomes really awkward. Next up, out of all the goddess cycle, because there's goddesses are a continuous spell thing that have Valkyrie synergy. This is the only one we're playing, and we're playing this one because when it's activated, you can target one Valkyrie monster, or your opponent cannot target Valkyries, and they can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. That's the relevant effect. The second effect, you declare a card name after a set, and if you call it right, you banish it. Otherwise, you have to banish a card you control. Don't use that effect unless you know for a fact what they set. And that's the deck. So, that is the main deck. Extra deck doesn't matter. What are some changes that you can do to this deck if you wanted to play it and make it a little bit more budget friendly? Say a little bit more because there are still cards in the deck that you have to play that are kind of expensive. So, Ride of the Valkyries is like $13 a piece on TCG Player after shipping, or around there. So that's at least like $39. And Mischief of the Time Goddess is like another $9 a piece. So that's like 50 some odd dollars. So that's like almost your whole budget if you were trying to make this like $100 deck. Uh, Time Goddess, Ride of the Valkyries, and Brunhild are the most expensive cards. Brunhild's like 10. So almost all of those are expensive, but then the rest of the Valkyries are pretty cheap. They're like $1 or $2. I think they're like less than $3 a piece, and all that. So what are some decisions you can make for a budget? Well, for starters, you can cut Extravagance, because Extravagance is still like $30 a piece. So you can cut Extravagance for Pot of Desires. Pot of Desires is a little bit worse in this deck than Extravagance is, but it's okay. You can still OTK most of the time by resolving a Desires, and that's fine. It's just a little bit more risky since you're summoning more from the deck than you used to, and all that, and you're just summoning more in general. So the next two cards I'm going to talk about are cards for budget decisions. Well, not only are they budget decisions, but there's something that you can do if you don't want to run Extravagance, if you want to have more of an extra deck focused variant, which you can totally do, and there actually is a way to do it. You play Agent Venus. So Agent Creation Venus, you pay 500, summon a Mystic Shine Ball from your deck, which is a level 2 normal monster, but what that allows you to do is it allows you to make extra deck plays if you want. Next up, what you could do if you wanted to go first, or if you are playing, maybe, like, let's say you're playing this build and your opponent forces you to go first, maybe you side into Venus to start making link plays, and then you tailor your extra deck more towards the Venus side deck plan, so you can make link plays. And not only that, when you're going through your link plays, don't make any fairy monsters, because if you do that, when you send the Mystic Shine Balls and Agent of Creation to the graveyard from link summoning, you get to summon Archlord Christia, which if you have exactly 4 in your graveyard, you special summon it, you get a fairy back from your hand, and then your opponent can't special summon. Well, you can't special summon either, but neither player can special summon, so it helps lock out your opponent. Those are some going first plays you can do. Is you can make a good link monster with this. Maybe something like uh, Goddess Apollo, because if you end on the Apollo goddess and everything like that, you can you can you'll still have 4 in the graveyard, if as long as you don't use this, which is a fairy, or this to link climb up to it. But if you use like Link Spider and stuff like that, you can link climb up to it. So those are some ways to do that and all that. And then you can have 4. You can have this to stop, uh, you know, to stop special summons, and then you have Appaloosa to negate monster effects is something you could do. Both are pretty good, and that's a way that I thought of and everything that you could do if you wanted to make this deck go first. But that is it for this video. You can tell me what you think of this deck down below, and if you have any suggestions on how to make the deck better, go ahead and leave a comment and tell me. I do read all the comments. If it is your birthday today, happy birthday. If you want to send me any cool deck profiles or replays, email is in the description. I would love to see them. You could send me one of maybe that Synchron deck that I played, or this, or anything you want. I would love to see your replays. And of course, and as always, have a wonderful day.